People carry a belief that, past a certain age, we don't change anymore, that we are who we are, that our ways are set, and that the brain has hardened. But science proved it false, and one of the people who helped prove it was a Canadian woman named Barbara. Back in the 1950s, when Barbara was still a child, she was diagnosed with what today would likely be recognized as several learning difficulties. She read and wrote words backwards, got lost easily, and couldn't even tell time because she couldn't make sense of the relationship between the hands of a clock. Her teachers called her stupid. At the time, scientists believed the adult brain was fixed. You were born with the brain you had, and if it didn't work well, you simply had to live with it. Barbara refused to accept that. While she was still at university, she came across research suggesting something most people thought was impossible, that the brain could change when given the right kind of stimulation. That idea changed the direction of her life. If the brain could change, perhaps she could strengthen the abilities she had always struggled with. With no one to guide her, she became her own experiment. She created mental exercises and practiced them every day, spending hours in front of clocks until her brain slowly began to recognize the relationship between the hands. The process was slow and often frustrating, but little by little she learned to tell the time. Then grammar started to make sense. Later, so did logic. Barbara didn't simply learn ways to work around her difficulties. Through years of deliberate practice, she changed the way her brain functioned. Her story became one of the earliest real-life examples of what we now call neuroplasticity. And this changes the way we think about ourselves. Many of the habits, thoughts, and reactions we see as part of our personality are often the result of repetition. They feel permanent because we've practiced them for years. Imagine a trail through a forest. The first time you walk it, the path is barely visible. But if you keep taking the same route every day, it gradually becomes wider and easier to follow. Leave it alone long enough, and nature slowly covers it again until it almost disappears. Your brain works in a remarkably similar way. Every repeated thought, habit, and emotional reaction strengthens a particular pathway, making it easier for your brain to use it again. That's why certain behaviors feel automatic after years of repetition. They aren't fixed. They're simply the paths your brain has traveled the most. And that's encouraging, because if repeated actions built those pathways, repeated actions can also reshape them. Think about the stories you tell yourself. I'm not creative. I'm bad with money. I don't have discipline. This is just who I am. After years of repetition, those thoughts begin to feel like part of your identity. But your brain doesn't see them as identity. It sees them as patterns that have been reinforced over time. And patterns can change. That's exactly what neuroplasticity makes possible. Here are 5 simple practices that can help you build new pathways and gradually become the person you want to be. First practice: choose the behavior, not just the result. Most people define what they want based on the result. I want to be healthier. I want to be more patient. I want to learn a new language. But your brain doesn't change because of a goal. It changes because of what you repeatedly do. It molds itself to steps. Your job is to turn your desires into a small, concrete, daily behavior. So instead of asking, "What do I want to become?" ask, "What can I do today?" That's an important difference. A goal like being healthier is too abstract for your brain to act on. But taking a 30-minute walk after lunch is a clear behavior it can repeat. Instead of trying to be calmer, You spend 2 minutes breathing every morning. Instead of simply wanting to learn Spanish, you practice one new phrase each day. Your brain can't repeat a goal. It can only repeat a behavior. And every repetition makes that behavior a little easier to follow the next time. Second practice. Make it small enough to repeat. One of the biggest reasons people fail to build new habits is that they ask too much of themselves too soon. We get excited, set ambitious goals, and expect them to fit into everyday life. Most of the time, they don't. A better approach is to make the habit so small that it hardly feels like an effort. 5 minutes of walking, 1 page of reading, 1 minute of meditation. It may seem insignificant, but small actions are much easier to keep, especially on busy or exhausting days. This idea is very close to the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, which is built around small, continuous improvements instead of dramatic change. I have an entire video about it on the channel if you'd like to explore it further. The important thing is to make the habit easy enough that you don't have to negotiate with yourself every day. Once it naturally becomes part of your routine, making it bigger is much easier. Third practice. Cut out what you no longer want. Here's a part almost everyone forgets. We think of change only as adding good things, new habits, and new actions. But reprogramming the brain is as much adding as it is subtracting. Remember how the trail you stop using becomes covered by the brush until it disappears? That's precisely what you do with the habits you no longer want. You let them die from lack of use. And there's a smarter way to do this. Instead of fighting an old habit every day, make it harder to reach. Remove the cues that trigger it and create a little friction. If you can't resist the candy on the counter, stop keeping it there. If your phone keeps distracting you, leave it in another room while you work. Every time you avoid the old pathway, you give the new one a chance to grow stronger. Fourth practice. Give your brain time. This might be the most important one of all, because it's where almost everyone gives up. Neuroplasticity is real, but it isn't instant. The brain needs time to open a new trail, and that process has roughly predictable stages. During the first few weeks, a new habit often feels awkward and unnatural, but if you stick with it, your brain gradually adapts, and what once felt difficult begins to feel routine. So remember this when things feel difficult. Struggling with a new habit doesn't mean you're failing. It means your brain is still adapting to something unfamiliar. The discomfort is part of the process, not a reason to give up. Fifth practice. Make peace with mistakes. Mistakes are part of how we learn. When something doesn't work the way we expected, our brain starts looking for a different approach. The struggle is what pushes us to adjust, improve, and find a better way forward. The problem is that many of us try to avoid mistakes at all costs. We stay with what we already know, choose what feels safe, and miss the situations where real growth happens. So the next time you struggle while learning something new, don't see it as evidence that you aren't capable. See it as part of the process. The mistake is the feedback your brain needs to adapt. Progress doesn't come from getting everything right from the beginning. It comes from trying, adjusting, and trying again. Neuroplasticity isn't some new feature you have to switch on. It's been running since the day you were born, and it's been shaping you this whole time in every single thing you repeated, day after day, for decades. Who you are today is, in large part, the result of the trails you walked without noticing. So the real question was never, can I still change? You just saw that you can at any age. The real question, the one that unsettles and frees you at the same time, is another. What have you been teaching your brain every day without realizing it? Because the map of who you are wasn't written in pen. It was written in pencil. And pencil, as you know, can be erased and rewritten as many times as needed. So all you have to do is choose a new trail, however small, and start walking down it today. Repeat it tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. The rest, your brain does for you.